The era of peaceful globalization, as we knew it, is completely dead. For the last 80 years, we've been living in this beautiful, comfortable illusion of a stable world. We really thought free trade and open borders were the ultimate future of humanity. But that was just a temporary truce, and today we're watching it take its final breaths. Welcome to the Special Explainer from The Truth Is, where we're going to pull back the curtain on the harsh realities of the New World Order. Today, we're diving deep into how power actually works in the modern world. A world where survival no longer depends on paper wealth, but on hoarding resources, ruthless national discipline, and silent weapons hiding in the dark depths of the ocean. To understand just how distorted our view of the world is, we have to start with the map you've been looking at your entire life. Think about this for a second. Africa is actually 14 times larger than Greenland. 14 times! But if you picture the famous 1569 Mercator map, you know, the one hanging in every classroom and used on every news channel, they look like they're the exact same size. Why? Because that map was designed for 16th century sailors to navigate, not to show the truth. It deliberately inflates the northern hemisphere, making Europe and North America look massive and dominant while literally shrinking Africa. Our entire modern worldview, our understanding of global power and resources, is built on a massive, centuries-old illusion.
And just like that map, the entire system of globalization built after World War II is an illusion that's rapidly shattering. The old world was built on free trade, the American dollar, and global supply chains. But behind closed doors, global leaders are finally admitting a bitter truth. This system has failed the West. The middle class has been hollowed out, and production was shipped overseas. Now, as nations lose trust in mutual agreements, we're stepping into a fractured new world. We're moving away from an era of mutual consent and heading straight into a future of regional alliances, aggressive resource hoarding, and strict sovereign control. Global cooperation has been replaced by digital control and ruthless efficiency.
Section 1. The new currency of power.
This shift is completely changing how nations secure their futures. In the old world, power was all about how much capital you could move across borders. But in the new world, nations aren't surviving through free trade. They're guaranteeing their existence by monopolizing absolutely vital physical resources. Raw materials are the new currency of power, and the ultimate example of this right now is Norway. In 2023, Norwegian geologists made a discovery deep underground that is going to permanently alter the global economy. 70 billion. That's the number. 70 billion tons of phosphate rock. Phosphate is literally the oxygen of the modern world. It's the critical ingredient in the fertilizers that feed the entire planet, and it's absolutely essential for solar panels and electric vehicle batteries.
To put the sheer scale of this wealth in the perspective, this discovery is valued at roughly $24 trillion. $24 trillion. That is equal to the entirety of Saudi Arabia's remaining oil wealth. In this fractured new world, raw resources like phosphate are the ultimate geopolitical weapons. Just think back to 2021, when China restricted its phosphate exports to protect its domestic supply, global prices skyrocketed almost instantly. Markets aren't free anymore, they're weaponized, and Norway just got its hands on the biggest, most loaded weapon out there.
Now, what's really fascinating here is exactly how Norway handles this unimaginable wealth. Most countries hit with this kind of jackpot fall straight into the resource curse, massive corruption where a few elites get wildly rich while the public struggles. But not Norway. They enforce a remarkably strict rule. They only spend 3% of the returns from their wealth. Everything else gets locked away in a sovereign wealth fund that has already smashed past the $1.5 trillion mark. They operate with incredible discipline, total state control, and strategic patience. They don't just dig it all up and sell it. They wait, ensuring they completely control the global supply. This immense discipline makes them economically untouchable.
Section 2. The price of survival.
While Norway uses extreme economic discipline to thrive, some nations have had to adopt absolutely terrifying methods just to survive. In a ruthless world, securing your existence often requires an iron fist, not a democratic vote. Just look at this jaw-dropping economic leap, from $50 to over $36,000. That is South Korea's miraculous GDP per capita transformation. In the early 1960s, South Korea was one of the poorest nations on Earth, with an economy comparable to the poorest parts of Africa. But in just a few decades, it morphed into a high-tech, global powerhouse. But here's the catch. That miracle wasn't born from democracy or free markets. It was brutally engineered by a dictator.
So, the crucial point is that this progress came at a massive, terrifying human cost. Under the rule of dictator Park Chung-hee, national discipline was placed far above personal freedom to ensure the country's survival. He literally had corrupt businessmen arrested, paraded them through the streets in humiliation, and forced them to invest in industries. He nationalized the banks so the state had absolute control over credit. Companies like Samsung and Hyundai, which had zero experience in these fields at the time, were handed massive, forced export targets. It was succeed or lose everything. He enforced brutal 14-hour workdays for teenagers in factories and suspended all political and civil liberties. It's a shocking reality, but it was his ruthless methods that built the wealthy South Korea we know today.
We see that same dark reality mirrored in Singapore, a nation kicked out of Malaysia in 1965 with no army, no natural resources, not even drinking water. Under Lee Kuan Yew's leadership, they adopted absolute, uncompromising discipline. Lee once said something that perfectly captures this grim reality. Between being loved and being feared, I have always believed Machiavelli was right. He ruled Singapore with zero tolerance, crushing political opposition and prioritizing extreme order above all else. It cements the bitter truth that sometimes building a successful nation from the ashes requires terrifying control.
Section 3. The Fading Paradises.
So we've seen how rising powers are securing their place through raw resources and iron discipline. But what happens to the countries entirely dependent on the old rules of peace, beauty, and globalization? Let's contrast those rising industrial titans with gorgeous but highly vulnerable nations that are slowly hollowing out from the inside. Take New Zealand. It is widely considered one of the most beautiful, peaceful places on Earth. Yet, 80% of New Zealand is completely empty. It is so geographically isolated from global trade routes and massive population centers that building a large-scale modern economy is incredibly difficult. It might look like a paradise on a postcard, but geographically, it's totally cut off from the engines of the New World.
And because of that isolation, New Zealand is trapped in a brutal economic cycle built on two pillars. First is agriculture. It's highly productive but heavily mechanized, which means there are very few high-paying corporate jobs for ambitious youth. The second pillar is real estate. In New Zealand, a house isn't just a place to live anymore, it's a financial instrument. With skyrocketing building costs and an economy heavily reliant on property investment, buying a home has become completely unaffordable for the average person. Together, these two pillars are actively pricing out the exact young professionals needed to build the country's future.
The result is something you rarely see in a wealthy, developed nation, a first-world brain drain. Young, skilled, and ambitious New Zealanders are packing their bags and leaving the breathtaking scenery behind. Because it's legally easy to do, they're flocking to Australia. They are leaving for massive industries, significantly higher corporate salaries, and real career ceilings. New Zealand is literally bleeding its doctors, engineers, and future leaders.
Which brings us to a really ominous question. What happens to a nation when it loses its most ambitious generation and just becomes a luxury waiting room? While wealthy retirees move there to enjoy the views, the youth who actually build the country are leaving. Losing that demographic momentum is a slow, silent, but absolutely fatal collapse for a nation's future. Stunning scenery alone cannot protect a nation's existence.
Section 4. The Silent Deep Sea Deterrent.
Let's move on and see how this builds. As the global order shatters, economics and resources are only half the battle. Now, we're shifting our focus from economic survival to existential, military survival. When the U.S. dropped the first atomic bomb, they thought they'd hold a monopoly on global power forever. But looking back at history, that monopoly shattered almost instantly. Driven by spies, desperation, and the raw instinct to survive, the terrifying power of the nuclear bomb spread across the globe like wildfire. The Soviet Union stole the data. The UK, cut off from American secrets, built their own. France demanded sovereignty. China rapidly developed both atomic and hydrogen bombs. The technology to wipe out humanity was suddenly completely out of any single nation's control.
But here is the reality of the modern age. Land-based weapons aren't the ultimate deterrent anymore. Treaties, satellite inspections, and political theater all focus on land borders. But the true, absolute power of nuclear nations, the real existential threat, is completely invisible. It's hiding in the dark, crushing depths of the oceans.
And this brilliantly illustrates what survival actually looks like today. Nuclear submarines are the ultimate insurance policy. Operated by nations like the US, Russia, the UK, China, France, and India, these silent machines can remain undetected underwater for months on end. Their sole purpose is to guarantee that even if a surprise attack wipes their homeland completely off the map, these submarines will rise from the dark and launch retaliatory strikes from anywhere on Earth. They are the final, terrifying shield of a nation's existence.
And that brings us to the dark logic of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. It's a terrifying concept.
the absolute guarantee of total annihilation for both the attacker and the defender. Yet, paradoxically, it's the sheer terror of this global suicide pact that has maintained peace between major powers for the last 80 years. We aren't being kept safe by treaties or goodwill. We are being kept safe by the fear of silent weapons lurking in the deep.
We are stepping out of the golden era of easy globalization and straight into a ruthless reality. So, I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. When all the global agreements break down and the 80-year-old illusion finally shatters, are we truly ready for a future where our very existence relies entirely on hoarding raw resources, brutal national discipline, and silent weapons waiting in the dark? Thanks for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning the map you've been handed. Take care, and we'll see you next time.